Okay, so in this section we're going to talk about how to set your bow up for the very first time. So your bow's arrived, you've taken it out the box, and what you have are bits. So in archery, particularly with recurve bows, you can't just take it out the box, whack it together, and it's going to shoot straight. To give yourself the best chance of being satisfied with your first attempts at archery, you need to set your bow up so that it should be shooting in roughly the right direction when you actually release an arrow out of it. So in this section we're going to look at what bits come with your bow, how to put them together properly, and then how to adjust them. This might seem a bit finicky, but it's really the bare bones of what you need to do. Right, so in your kit you're going to have your handle. In this case what we're going to do is we're going to set up a full ILF handle, and this is what we'll be training on, etc., so that we're using the same thing all the way through. So this one is a Stark magnesium handle. As I say, it's ILF, which is International Limb Fit, which we covered in another section. So with your bow you will have a set of limbs. Now on the limbs there is a sticker which you can see there. So this has a series of numbers on it, if I bring it a little bit closer. So you'll see that it says on this one that it's 24 pounds at 66 inch and 22 pounds at 68 inch. So what that means is you can get handles which are 25 inches long, handles which are 23 inches long. So it means that that limb on a 23 inch handle will have a draw weight of 24 pounds at 28 inches. And if it was on a 25 inch handle, it'll have a 22 pound draw at 28 inches. And we'll come on to all this. But the main thing on this sticker as well is you'll see down here, it'll either say upper or lower. So in this case, this one says upper. So that means it goes on the top of the handle, not the bottom. So the way this goes together is the top of it you'll see is mushroom shaped. And this actually sits into, you can see the receiver there, it has a slot. So this actually just clips in. That's it in position. So it will move around at this point. Don't worry about that. Your other limb is obviously the lower one, and it goes on the bottom. So when you push them in, make sure it's a positive connection that you get. Make sure it's not just half in. It should actually sit so that the slot that's on this fits right underneath this mushroom headed bolt. Okay? So, first thing we want to do is put our string on this. So your string will come in a packet. Now your string, certainly the ones we sell, we always sell them with the bow length on them. So you'll see there, this is a 68 inch bow, and you'll see the string says 68 inch. The string isn't physically 68 inches long, it's actually 4 inches shorter. So what we're advertising on here is the length of the bow, not the length of the string. So the string's made to fit a bow of 68 inches. It isn't physically 68 inches long. Right, the other thing you'll find with all strings, you've got a loop at each end, but you'll see that one is longer than the other. The big loop always goes to the top of the bow. So to string your bow, first of all, this is the top. We put the large loop over the top and we slide it down the limb. We then take the small loop and we're going to put that on the bottom. But we're going to actually fit that where it will finally rest in the groove at the end of the limb. We then take the stringer, and I would always advise that you use a stringer because if you try any other way, there's a good chance of you hurting yourself. So the stringer pocket goes over the bottom of the bow, and at the other end we put the saddle over the limb and over the top of the string. Okay, so I've moved out onto the range to give myself a bit of space and so that you can see more clearly what I'm going to do here. So string on the top, halfway down the limb, pocket on the bottom with the string already on the end groove of the limb. So what we're going to do now, this particular stringer has a rubberized part on it here which should stop it from slipping. Some of them don't, so when you're putting this on, I would always advise you use 2 feet, spread your feet apart, take the stringer out as far as you can, you pull up with one hand to tension the limbs, slide the string up to the end, put it onto the groove, make sure it's centralised and the string is behind the limb, and then slowly take the tension off. And your string is now in position. Then what you do is you check the back of it and make sure that the string is sitting central on the limb, top and bottom. And that's all you need to do to put that on. Okay, so we're now back in the workshop and we're now going to look at how to fit your arrow rest, knot points, set your brace height, set your tiller, set your centre shot. It all sounds really complicated, but it really is pretty simple. You're going to need a few basic tools. First thing we'd always advocate is you get one of these. This is called a bow square and it's used for making measurements and for positioning your knot points. The other thing, you can get dedicated knot point pliers, which is what these are, and these are shaped at the end so they're kind of rounded, and that's to take the knock in them. And the knock looks like, if you can see it, they're tiny. They look like the little brass thing. In fact, if I put it inside the, there we go. So you can see it's a little brass knock, and that goes on the string, and this will mark the area where you actually fix your arrow onto the string later on. So that's your basic tools. What would also be useful are these things. These are called limb gauges, and these will help you line up the string and your centre shot. I use 4, you can use 2. 4 is just simpler, you know, because we're setting up so many bows here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is positioning your arrow rest and doing your knot points. In this instance, what we're going to be fitting is a magnetic arrow rest, which looks like this. Now, by magnetic, it doesn't mean that it just sticks to the bow of its own accord. It is a sticky back arrow rest. The magnet is actually down here, and what it does, if I just hold that up, this little arm is on a magnet, so if I push it in, the magnet pulls it back out again. Right? And this is so that as the arrow passes over it, it flattens itself against the bow and allows the arrow to leave the bow with the minimum amount of interference from the arrow rest. The arrow rest works along with one of these things. This is a pressure button. That we'll be showing you how to fit that. It does 2 things. First of all, it lets you set up your centre shot, which we'll come on to. It also helps straighten out your arrow. Okay, so when an arrow leaves the bow, the first thing it wants to do is that, because it's had this force exerted on the back of it, and the first thing it wants to do is bend. What a pressure button does is it tries to push back against that. So on the end of it here, this section here is actually a little piston. Right, inside here is a spring, which you can adjust the tension of by turning this little screw at the back of it. So this little spring is trying to absorb that energy and push back against the arrow, so that the arrow, when it's leaving your bow, is oscillating as little as possible, because the more it wobbles, then the less accurate it's going to be. So when this is actually positioned in the bow, you want it so that, if I just hold this up, the arrow is sitting dead center. You can see that it sits dead center against the button. So you don't want the button sitting up on the top edge or the bottom edge, you want it sitting in the middle here. So we have to then ensure that when the arrow rest is in position, you'll see there's a hole in it here. So the button will emerge through this hole when it's on, so it will sit like this. Yeah. So we've got to make sure that that comes through so that when it's sitting against the arrow, we've got it sitting at the middle of the curve of the arrow, not to the top and not to the bottom. Okay, so I've now got you on the little mini tripod so you can get a better look at this. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that this area here is actually clean, dust free. I've already given this a wipe down with some methylated spirits just to make sure there's nothing stuck there. So I've already screwed this button through from the back so that I can see where this needs to be relative to it, so that when I put the arrow on, it's going to be sitting, remember, with a button against it in the middle. So first thing to do if you've got an arrow rest is just make sure that it is actually going to sit where you need it to, and that it's not sticking out the back here or it's sticking into a hole here, because a lot of times when you order stuff up, particularly if you've got it from different places or from, let's say, a less reputable dealer, they might just throw a kit together and it won't be ideal and it won't be compatible. So you want to stick this on so that the arrow rest here is level. So that's the moving part here. So all we do is we remove the self-adhesive backing. I usually just hold it with this bit to give me a bit more. Sorry you can't quite see me placing this, but I just need to get this right. So initially all I'll do is just sit it in position. Right. I could do it going up a little bit. Okay, so that's looking pretty level. The button's going to come through at the right bit. I can see I've got no overlaps off the sides or anything like that. So all I do then is just press it down. And that's that positioned. Okay, next thing I need to do is put my knock points on. So we need 2 of these. Right, and they're little brass knocks. So what I need to do with these, if you look at the end of an arrow, you'll see that the knock actually tapers. It's not the same diameter as the arrow. So what we want to do is put our knocks onto the string so that when the arrow is sitting in position, that it sits level. You don't want it, when you release it, you don't want the arrow coming at an angle and bouncing off, nor do you want it at an angle going up the way, because it just won't fly properly. So to get the level, on here we've got some markings at the back here which shows me the baseline for here. Now I'm going to want to put my lower knock slightly higher because of the taper on the knock of the arrow. Sorry, they're both called knocks. So what we do is we clip this onto the string. We're then going to move it down until it just touches the arrow rest. Yeah, so just got that contact there. Right, we're then going to want to put our lower knock on. So I usually just put these on a flat surface and pick them up with the pliers. That way I know that the knock is flush with that edge of the pliers. So that when I position it, I know where the knock is. So I'm going to position that against that first notch up. Okay, so I squeeze it enough that it will hold it onto the string, but not so tight as it's going to be its final position, in case I want to adjust it very slightly. Okay, I can then take this off, get my arrow, attach it to the string above the knock that I've just attached. get my other knock, and again I've got it positioned flat against the surface, and this time I'm going to put it up against the edge of the arrow knock and just squeeze that on slightly. Okay, and then I can take my arrow out of the way. Now normally what I would do is I'd pick this up and I'd eyeball it with the arrow in position. I'd take it vertical and eyeball it and make sure that that's going to be straight, but I've done this a few times so I know it will be. So at this point I can then just turn the string as I'm doing this and just make sure that the knock is fully secured, and that's the knock point done. Okay, so we now have our arrow rest is in position and we've got our knock points on the string. So before we actually start fitting buttons and all that sort of stuff, what we really need to do is make sure that the rest of the bow is set up correctly. So I mentioned brace height earlier. So again, we're going to use our bow square to measure brace height. So the brace height is the measurement from, now this is actually, we're in archery, this is actually the front of the handle and that's the back of the handle, and that's because when you're holding it, the back becomes the front and the front becomes the back. And you'll find this with archery, lots of terminologies that just don't make sense. So back of the handle to the string is the brace height. So on this handle, 25-inch handle, it can be anywhere between 8.5 to 9.25 inches. Now, when I'm initially setting up a bow, I'll generally set it up about 8.75. Bow tuning is something that we'll do in a completely separate bit. This will get you started, but it can be adjusted from that point. So we want 8.25. So again on here, and you can just about see it, there is measuring. So all we do is we take the bow square, sit it on the back of the handle, and where it meets the string, lo and behold, we're just over 8.75. Now, if it's not the size you want it to be, what do? So this string, when it arrives, you'll see that it's got twists in it, right? So these are made up of lots of strands and they're twisted. So you can adjust the brace height by either adding twists or subtracting twists. If you're having to subtract them, I would suggest you've been given the wrong string. So to add the twists, all you would do is de-string the bow at one end. I take that end off, add your twists to it and put it back on again, and that will have shortened the string. So if you need to move at a great distance, maybe put 10, 12 twists in it, put it back on, see where that's got you to. If it's too much, take string off, 3 or 4 turns back off it again and remeasure, and so forth until you've got it to, as I say, if it's a 25-inch handle, giving you a 68-inch bow, about 8.75. The sweet spot in my bow is 8 7/8. So, you know, but each bow can be different. So that's what you need to do to adjust this. The other critical adjustments are tiller. So that's the distance from where the handle meets the limb at the top and the bottom, from there to the string. And again, we just measure it. Now, I tend to do this one in millimeters. You'll find with archery, some of it's imperial and some of it isn't. Some of it's metric, and it can get confusing. So at the moment on this bow at the top, I have 17.6 centimeters, and at the bottom I have 17.4 centimeters. Okay, so ideally what you want is a difference of between 4 and 6 millimeters, with the top being bigger than the bottom. You're going to ask me why. Okay, so when you're holding a bow, you're not holding it in the middle, you're holding it slightly below center. So when you draw that bow back, you're actually not drawing it symmetrically, you're drawing it asymmetrically. So that means that the top limb is being pulled back a different distance to the bottom limb. So when you release it, both limbs are released at the same time, but one limb's got further to travel than the other one. So hence you have that slight difference in the top and the bottom, because you want your limbs to arrive back at rest at the same time. If they don't, if this adjustment's wrong and they arrive back at a different time, then you're going to get a lot of vibration. Vibration obviously is not good. It means that if you've got things attached to your bow like sights and stabilizers, etc., they just vibrate loose. So will your button. So what you want to do is make sure that you get that difference there. If they're both the same or the top smaller than the bottom, you don't want that. You know, get yourself 4 to 6 millimeters to get you started of a difference here. So how do you do that? Okay, so adjusting your tiller. First thing I would suggest is take the tension off your string. So I've just taken it off here. I've just taken it off at the top and slid it down and left it on at the bottom. Okay, so adjusters. On your bow, you'll find on the back of it here, there's a nut. Now, you should have got some Allen keys along with your handle. If you didn't, then what you need to do is make sure you get yourself a set of Imperial, these are all Imperial Allen keys, and use them to adjust. You don't want to round these off by using metrics. Okay, so I have a set here that I use in the workshop, but you should have got Allen keys with your bow. So first thing you want to do is you would undo that. That is a lock nut on the back there. Okay, so all you're doing is just undoing that, just to take to unlock the nut on the front, which is this one. Now sometimes these will have Allen keys, sometimes they will be posi drive. Generally Allen keys. Okay, so by adjusting this here in and out, what it allows the bow, the limb to do is either sit back or come forward. So in this instance, I need to increase the size because I only had 2mm difference and I want 4mm difference. So to do that, I need to undo this one. And I don't need to do it much. For 2mm, half a turn at the most, at the very most, half a turn. So I'm just going to take that out, half a turn. That's it, okay? Until you are happy with this adjustment, I would leave this unlocked at the back. Just be sure that the size, just be sure that once you've got your size right, that you actually tighten these up again. Because again, what will happen is these will vibrate loose if you don't tighten everything up. Right? And that's how you basically adjust. So if the bottom was bigger than the top, you can either adjust the top out or you can adjust the bottom in. But the main thing is to increase it, you undo, and to decrease it, you turn it in the way. In all this, the thing to make sure you don't do is unscrew this too far. If you unscrew it too far, when you draw the bow, this could pop out. These here can also adjust the draw weight of the bow. You can plus or minus 2 pounds on whatever the rating of your limb is. But the first thing you want to do is get your tiller set properly, because it then means that if you want to reduce or increase the poundage of your bow, you would either put on a turn, half a turn at the top and at the bottom. So once your tiller's set up, you know that whatever you do at the top, you do at the bottom to adjust your actual draw weight. But to get your tiller right first. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so I've had to move you out the workshop a bit so that we can get a better look at the bow. So earlier on I talked about a thing called centre shot. So if you look at the bow in the vise at the moment, you can see the string running down the centre of the bow. So how do I know it's the centre? Okay, we talked about these 2 bolt locations where the lock bolts are earlier. If you actually stand your bow up against a chair or lean it against the wall, stand back and then eyeball the string, yeah, so that it's through the centre of the top and bottom bolts. Now, a lot of the time we'll get stuff that comes out of the box and it's pretty much there, but equally so we can get stuff that's out of the box that isn't, and it needs to be at least roughly centred. Ideally you want it right in the middle. We also use, I think I showed you them earlier, we also use these things which are limb gauges. So these you can see have little stripes on them. So I can actually connect them, just push them onto the limbs. I usually do 2 top and 2 bottom. They do usually sell in sets of 2. On right. There we go. And then I would do 2 in the bottom as well. And what this does is it gives you, between these lines is again the centre. So and just let me bring that in a bit more so you can see. Right, so you can see, and if I bring it round, centre it up, yeah, so that it just gives you more reference points so that you can see better whether you're running right down the middle of the bow or not. So if I just put that there just now, what if you're not running down the middle? What do? Excuse the fact that you can't see my head. Right, on the side of the bow, here and here, you have Allen key adjusters. So again with these, what you would do is you'd unlock both sides, yeah? Now on this particular bow, it's actually really nice design because I can actually just grab the handle, grab the limb, and I can actually move this limb like this way or that way, yeah? So in doing that, what I'm doing is I'm moving the string relative to the handle. So I can do that top and bottom, so I can adjust like this way or that way or this way to get the string down the middle. Once I've done that, I just tighten these off, and that way I've got my centre shot selected for the bow. Okay, so now we're going to look at pressure button, how to set your pressure button up. So your pressure button, and you do get different ones again, but what's common to them all is they have this collar, right? So it actually has a little grub screw in it, you can see there. So what we want to do is undo that so that that collar will move. Okay, so this is maybe not bang on from your perspective, but basically what I want to do is show you how to set this up. So first of all, set your tension in your button. So on this particular one, there's a little grub screw at the back here, which I've already undone. Right, I'm just tightening up again. So I undid that so that I could adjust this. So this one moves in and out, and inside here there's a spring. So as I move it in, I'm compressing the spring, which makes it harder for this to compress. So what I would suggest when you're just getting started, when you get your button, screw it right up tight, count the amount of turns, yeah? Screw it all the way back out again, count the amount of turns, and then screw it back in halfway, and that will give you a sort of medium tension on this, and it's enough to get you started. And again, when you start tuning bows properly, you can then muck about with that later on. At the moment, we just want to get your bow set up so that you can shoot. Okay, so this here is going to screw through the hole that we looked at earlier. So I'm just going to put that through, and you should be able to see the end of it emerging here if I take it over further than it needs to go. So that's the end of it, just coming through there. Okay, so get your arrow and knock it on the string and sit it on the arrow rest against the button. So now you can see from here, there is the end of the arrow, and you can see that it's pointing way over. What we want to do is adjust that button backwards, or back away again, so that the point of that arrow here comes to the point where it's just slightly, now if you're a right-handed shooter, you'll want it slightly to the right of the string. If you're a left-handed shooter, you'll want it slightly to the left of the string. Is that right? Sorry, no, right-handed shooter to the left, left-handed shooter to the right. Okay, so I'm just going to use my finger pressure against this just so that it tracks back as I move the button. And hopefully, from your perspective, what you're going to see is the end of the arrow moving over. So where are we? There's the end of the arrow there. I'm looking at the wrong thing, hang on. Yeah, so I want it about here. So where's the... Yeah, I'm going to want it about there. So I just get that to there. Then what I'm going to do is tighten this collar or turn it so that it actually comes up against the side of the bow here. Yeah, and then I'm just going to use my little Allen key to tighten up the grub screw. Right, so that's the button now set. So when I've put my bow into my bag in storage, I don't want to leave that button sticking out here. So I can actually now just unscrew that. And that button, that collar is now fixed. Yeah. So it's not going to go anywhere. So I can put that into storage. Next time I need it, I can just screw it back in. Just screw it in tight, the way it was, and it'll be ready to shoot. And that's how you set up a button. I'm getting told for this. Okay, so next thing I want to do is fit the sight if you're going to use one. You might want to shoot bare bow to start with, but obviously you need to know how to fit your sight thereafter. Okay, so this is the WNS bow sight. They come in all shapes and sizes, and again, we're going to cover that in a different section. The common thing with them is they all have a sight mount. So this is the bit that actually screws on to the bow. Once it's on, you leave it there. So it comes with 2 screws. If I just show you this. So you got 2 screws in there, and on the side of your bow you'll have 2 screw holes. These screws are a standard thread on all recurve bows, and the distance between the screw ports on this are also a standard distance on all these bows. So basically any recurve sight will fit a recurve bow. So to put it on, you literally just, if I just take one of those screws out. So I'm doing this a bit backside foremost so you can see. So you literally just introduce one screw, put the other one in, find the hole, wherever it be. There it is. And then just tighten your 2 screws up. And then your sight just slides in. Now, because you're going to be starting off at short distances, I would say either screw it in the first hole or the second hole. And again, we'll explain what these sights mean in the future. Right, if I then just turn this round. Okay, so we've turned the bow around, and I've kind of tried to set it up again so that you're looking at the centre shot of the bow. So what you want is, here is the optic on the sight, and what you want is for the string here to be running down the right hand side of the optic. So there's an adjuster on here that lets you move this backwards and forwards, but for initial setup you want it so the string's just running down the right hand side. Again, other way around if you're a left-handed archer. Okay, and again, if you're shooting at short distances, I would expect the optic on its rail, if I just turn this again, let's turn that round. So that's the rail here, which this can slide up and down on. So that's your elevation adjuster. I would expect you to be shooting, if you're shooting 10 meters, I'd expect that to be maybe 1.5 to 2 centimeters down. If you're way down here and you're shooting at close quarters, something's wrong. So you should be up here. And for every 10 meters that you move out, I'd expect you to move down about 1 centimeter. So, but always start 10 meters. Make sure you're hitting the target before you start trying to move out to bigger distances. Okay, so that's you pretty much good to go. We've done how to put your string on, how to adjust your brace height, knock points, fitting your arrow rest, fitting your button. We've done the tiller adjustments. The only thing we haven't covered in this is how to adjust your draw weight. But to be honest, if you've got your tiller set up right, I would just leave it. If you're comfortable shooting it, just leave it. Adjusting your draw weight is something you can do further down the road when you're feeling more confident, etc. etc. So we'll cover adjusting that in a different module, but for now, time to start shooting.